Hello everyone, and this one is a banger. Now, how many times have you been told people like Nora Ames and Zero Dark Tony are OSA operatives because they stood up against some of the people in the anti-Scientology movement, trying to sort of cover up that some of them are doing bad things? Nora Ames is not OSA. Either is Zero Dark Tony. And actually, I got this video originally from Zero Dark Tony because I watched a video of his last night. Now, I know Tony pushed the boat a little bit too far and stuff, but some of the stuff actually, you know, he was telling the truth about things. He was going against the grain. And he was constantly being accused of being an OSA op by Aaron, by William Good, by all these other people. It was not true. So Tony had to figure out, who is OSA, who's OSA, and where's my money? So, you know, he done a bit of digging and he came up with this video to educate himself on some of the operations. Now, I don't know when the name OSA came into all of this, because this guy, McClaughry, doesn't mention the word OSA in this video at all. Special ops, dark ops, all that kind of thing. This was in L. Ron Hubbard's time. So I don't know when it was called OSA or, you know, OSA or whatever. This is kind of the same activity, but he doesn't mention OSA. So, you possibly heard of people trying to leave Scientology, and these people are followed home, and special agents outside their house, all this kind of stuff, and trying to get people back by, you know, following them to the airport and trying to get them back, and trying to get into the anti-Scientology movement, which was active at the time. This is the inside to the operations. Now, the beginning of this is kind of weird because the guy says he still, at the time, was still into the tech. I don't know what tech he's talking about, because the only piece of technology that I actually seen was the E-meter, which was kind of a resistance, a body resistance meter, where you hold two cans and it measures resistance. It's 1/4 or 1/3 of the lie detector test thing. But he'll get into that. Anyway, let's get into the video.
Larry, I'm a Scientologist.
He says he's a current Scientologist. Now, take into account this video is old. I'm going to go over here because I think there might be more room. He says he's... After all the stuff he's going to spill, I doubt it if he was a current Scientologist at the time he made the video. And if he was, he probably was not after he made this video. Now, this video was made a long time ago. And these operations that he's going to be talking about happened when L. Ron Hubbard was, you know, still alive. Now, I do have to interrupt every so often and talk about things, or talk about what he says, because it's fair use. Understand? Let's go.
I got into Scientology in late 1968, and in early 1969 I went on staff at the San Francisco org. The first 3 or 4 years I was on staff, I was an auditor and a course supervisor, basically course supervisor for the academy levels and every other course that Scientology delivered at that time. I liked the tech then, and I still like it today. And
I'd love to know what the tech is, apart from the e-meter thing. What exactly is tech?
And in mid-1973, I was
2 years after I was born.
approached to join the Guardian's office at San Francisco Org. And at the time, I did not want to get out of tech, and I declined their offer and said,
Go fuck yourself. No, he didn't say that. He wouldn't last too long if he did.
basically, I'm not interested, I want to stay working with the tech. So they reapproached me again a few weeks later. By the way, Kathy O'Gorman was the assistant guardian at San Francisco Org at the time. She was to become my senior. Doug Knopson was the assistant guardian for information, which is a euphemism for intelligence, and he was the one that was trying to recruit me. Anyway, I was approached a couple of weeks later again to join the Guardian's office, and they made me an offer, which was that I would get to go. I was at the time a power release, which is a grade 5, and they made me an offer that I could go up to OT4 if I would join the Guardian's office, and so I bid on that, and I said okay, and I joined the Guardian's office so that I could get some auditing.
Auditing is, as far as I know, is part of that e-meter thing that I was talking about. Now, there was probably more to it than that, but that's as far as I could understand it. But yeah, this guy is kind of like the James Bond of Scientology at the time.
So I went down, I guess it was midsummer of '73. I went down to take my training at the United States Guardian's office, which was in Los Angeles. And the person who was the Deputy Guardian Intelligence United States at that time was Terry Milner. Dick Wiegand was one of his juniors. I'm not sure what post he was holding at the time. And Greg, don't remember his last name off the top of my head, Willardson. Greg Willardson was also working with him, and they were over the course students, overseeing the training of the course students. It took me 6 months to finish my hatting in the Guardian's office.
I have no idea what that's about. Obviously some sort of training.
I read all the various materials that for the Intelligence Bureau.
I'm sure that was interesting.
That you might see on the internet or appearing in court cases or hat packs since then, and I would have personal knowledge that the issues in those hat packs are correct and were the ones that were studied and were the ones that we used and applied in our daily work. I'll talk about some of those in detail and give you some examples of what I did to apply those issues. My understanding was that the issues were primarily from LRH. Some of the issues had nobody's name on it, but just by the way they were written, I assumed they were from LRH. Some of them were from Mary Sue Hubbard. Some of them might have been from the Guardian, who was Jane Kember. But some of them didn't have Jane Kember's name or Mary Sue Hubbard's name on them. And I think that LRH wrote them.
Do you know what's interesting? LRH was a science fiction writer who goes on to create a Scientology. How does a science fiction writer go on to create a cult when he was known for writing fiction. So, if you put two and two together, isn't the cult not just bullshit too? I'm just thinking in simple terms, kind of thing.
The two specific ones that I'm talking about, they weren't under any kind of a normal issue like a policy letter or a guardian order or a ED or anything, right? It was just typing on a piece of paper. One was called Intelligence, Its Role, and the other one was, I don't even know that it had a name, but it told us how to do black intelligence operations.
This guy looks a bit like, John from Chips. You remember the Cops show years ago? The two guys punching John, the two guys on the motorbikes. It was kind of like, it was a kind of a thing that was on a Friday afternoon or something like that. He looks a bit like John.
This particular piece of paper. And like I said, there was no author for those two things. Although my understanding, impression, and so forth was that they were written by LRH because of the style of them. I've read a lot of his stuff. I know how he talks, I know how he writes, and I couldn't imagine anybody else have written them except him because of the style of how they were written. The basic idea was that intelligence was supposed to collect information and form what was called an estimate of the situation. An estimate of the situation was not something that was cast in stone or something that you could necessarily prove in court, but based on as much information about the enemy as you could ascertain, you were supposed to be able to determine whether there was a situation with the enemy that needed to be handled or whether there was no situation. And basically you were supposed to be able to form a prediction, like in any war situation. You infiltrate the enemy, you determine his size, his strength, what his next move is going to be, if he's going to make one, that kind of a thing. And the whole idea of the estimate of the situation, which was a primary product of the intelligence unit, was to make a prediction. What's the enemy going to do, when, where, with what strength, and so on and so forth, right? And having made that prediction, then intelligence was supposed to handle the situation before it ever happened.
Here's the thing. If you go into one of these centres, where they invite you in and, they take your name and address and possibly give you some auditing or get you to buy some books or whatever. Once you give your name or address, any information about you at all, you've already effed up. No information. Do not give information, because then you're screwed. Because what these people do is they try to get your weak point. They try to get something to blackmail you with further down the line. So they've got you by the balls, a matter of speaking. That's what their aim is.
And any time an attack came on the organization that was unpredicted, it was considered to be an intelligence failure. All somebody had to do was criticize Scientology and they would be considered an enemy. For instance, if they wrote a book that was negative on it in any form, if they got on a TV show or radio show, they didn't even have to go that far. If they were just talking to their neighbors and we heard of it.
It's a whole different story now with the internet. It's imagine back them days, the fear around Scientology. That you didn't speak about it. I didn't know about it in 2015 when I arrived in, what's the name? East Grinstead. I had to go to a hospital appointment, and my friend was with me because I needed somebody because I get lost everywhere. She says, this is where Scientology is. And I'm going, oh no. And I'm constantly then looking behind my back and stuff. I'm looking You know, it says, just look out for people that look like waitering staff in hotels, black and white, the penguins. Watch out for those kind of thing. And then, you know, you're getting on the bus and you're looking around to see if anybody's following you. I didn't know anything about Scientology at the time. The things I knew about Scientology, it was the fear around it, you know. So it was a fear was the power back then. But when the internet came in, they got outnumbered, and I think the tactics had to change.
If an attack happens that intelligence didn't predict, we weren't out of the ball game. That didn't mean that, you know. We kind of judged the severity of the attack and how bad it was by the different bureaus. The bureaus were laid out in a sequence. If intelligence failed and an attack occurred and intelligence wasn't handling it, then it went over to PR. Then we try to PR our way out of the attack. If PR failed, then the next thing it would go over to, the next bureau was the legal bureau, and you try to sue your way out of the attack. And if that failed, the last bureau was finance, and you buy your way out of the attack. The datum is that intelligence...
Here's the thing, the amount of money that people have to pay for these courses and stuff goes into shit like this, and buying up more buildings. How is that clearing the planet? I don't get it. To me, it looks like basically a real estate business, where the people that are slaving away are getting $45 a week because they're not classed as employees, they're classed as volunteers. Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's just the way I understand it.
Intelligence is supposed to predict and handle all attacks. Even if it wasn't predicted, intelligence was supposed to handle it. No other bureau was supposed to be doing a damn thing, okay, if intelligence is doing its job. They should all be sitting around with their feet on their desk with nothing to do, okay? Intelligence is supposed to handle it all by itself. When intelligence was having difficulty with a particular attack and they weren't getting the person handled, then other bureaus would enter the picture and they try to PR their way out of it, sue their way out of it, or buy their way out of it. But that was all considered to be an intelligence failure. Intelligence also had internal security to deal with. Part of our training was a book called Spying as Masters. This book taught you how to be a case officer. That's the master part of the title. The spy and his master. The case officer is the master of the spy. The technique used would be to determine the spy's motivation. Money was considered to be the lowest motivation. You don't want to recruit spies who are money motivated, because they will turn on you in a second. If the other side offers them another $10 more, they're on their side. So you try to avoid, you would have to determine what is this person's motivation in being a spy for us. Try to avoid people who were doing it for money. Try to avoid people, the next one up was people who were maybe ambitious, they had some ambition to get promoted within the organization, something like that was why they were doing it for you. Tried to avoid those as well. I think the next one up was people who had some political reason for doing it. In our case, we weren't into politics, but what that meant to me was like they had some kind of allegiance to the organization. They agreed with what you were doing, that kind of a thing. The top motivation was duty. The person was doing it out of a sense of responsibility.
Here's the thing. They weren't into politics, but they had control over who you voted for. So in a way, they were still backing up politicians. They still had their fingers in that pie, you know? I can't understand at the beginning that he says he's still a Scientologist. I don't get it, because you put out a video like this, you're out of Scientology. There's no way around that. He's not dumb either, you know what I mean? When he gets into a lot of the stuff that he's, was involved in.
And those are the kind of spies we tried to recruit because they were the safest, most unlikely to turn.
Unless he became an independent Scientologist. I don't know much about this guy. He doesn't have a channel, doesn't seem to have a channel. There's nothing more I could find on him except this video.
That kind of a thing. When I say spy, I'm talking about somebody who lives their cover. I'm not talking about somebody who does a 10-minute, we called them suitable guises. There's other words for them like pretext, interviews, that kind of a thing. A pretext interview or a suitable guise would be something that was a short-lived, a throwaway type cover for a temporary situation. I can hardly think of one. Let's say I just wanted to know your telephone number, okay? And so I call up, I don't know your telephone number, or maybe I can't find you, I don't know where you live, but I know where your mother lives, okay? So I call up your mother and say, I'm your friend, and I'm looking for you, can you tell me your phone number, and I get it, okay? That's a suitable guise or a pretext interview, okay?
Things are a lot easier now. You just look them up on Facebook and then you find all the information there. And you find out when they're on holidays and shit. Don't be doing shit like that. So many people, they put so much of their personal shit out on the internet. And then they wonder when they come back from holidays why their house was robbed. That's because you announced on Facebook that you were on holidays, dumbass.
That's a throwaway thing, you just use it once. It's there for a few minutes and it's gone, You got the information you wanted. Those were commonly used, but I'm not talking, when I say spy, I don't mean that. I mean somebody who is just like in the normal intelligence community, that governments, they're kind of spies that they use on each other. Those people live their cover. They have false identities in a lot of cases, and we did know how to make false identities for people. You basically go out and you look for an infant death in the newspaper around the age period of the person who's going to be the spy, okay? An infant death, there's a birth certificate on record there, but there's nobody who ever lived that life.
Yeah.
So you get their birth certificate, and you go out and you get yourself a driver's license, a social security card, and every other kind of ID you want, and assume that person's name. That's how you do it. Well, back then, I think laws have changed a little bit. Back then, you just walk in, it's public record, I want a copy of it. They didn't ask any questions. Give you a copy of it, and down you go to the DMV with it. This is me, give me a driver's license, and do the whole bit, right? You build a whole false identity. And there you go. So that's how that was done. That would be a deep cover type of spy. Now this person is, when I say they're living this false identity, that's what I mean. They're going by this false name, they have false, everything's false.
When you think about it, when Scientology goes to these lengths to silence people, I can't understand why people, don't ask, what are they trying to hide? You know what I mean? I didn't know anything about Scientology, way back, 2015, before that or whatever. But, some people, they ask me, would you like to join Scientology? No, because the only thing I know about Scientology is that, if you talk bad about them, they'll come after you. So what are they hiding? That's all I know about. That's all I knew about it. So I knew from the start that there's something dodgy going on here, but it seems to pass other people's minds, and they get roped into these things. Obviously, some people are born into it and stuff like that because their fathers and mothers were pulled into it and all the rest of it. But this is the only thing I knew about Scientology, was this fair game tactics and all this dodgy shit, like.
One of the nice things about that is this person could do any kind of a thing you ever heard of and never get blamed for it at his real identity. You know what I'm saying? It just wouldn't track back to him. We didn't do a lot of that. Mostly people would use their own real names, but they were still deep cover spies because they were living their cover every day. In a lot of cases, they had false names without going through the process of actually, building a total false identity for them. They would just say that we'd send them in to infiltrate the anti-cult movement, for instance, which is something I specifically did. What I did was I took a Scientologist. We wanted to infiltrate the anti-cult movement. I expelled this Scientologist, so on paper it looked like they were expelled. We wrote out the ethics orders, the whole bit, false comm, everything like that. And then this person was kicked out of the church. In everybody's mind in the church, this person was expelled Scientologist. The only people who knew that they weren't was, the guys in the intelligence bureau. And that's it.
They even kept these things from people in Scientology in case anything leaked.
A deep cover spy. So this person would go out, and they were using their actual name, but their cover was that they were no longer in Scientology, no longer agreed with it, agreed with the anti-cult people, and wanted to do, they were mad at Scientology. They wanted to help the anti-cult movement expose it and stuff like that. And then, so of course they were opened with welcome arms by the anti-cult people, and now here we go, and now there's my deep cover spy in the anti-cult movement. So predict. Oh, they're going to deprogram so-and-so tomorrow. Oh, I see. See what I mean? This group right here is a target for getting a spy in, and they ain't going to sleep at night until they do it.
Right, that's true.
Okay.
Hope it's not you.
Well, I'll tell you something about that that'll help you find out who it might be. Because intelligence is also charged with finding spies in the organization. Now, that person I'm talking about that I sent in on the anti-cult movement, there was a limit to what I would let that person do. Okay? They could criticize, they could help, they could complain, they could natter all they wanted to about Scientology. I really didn't care. But I would not let them go in the newspaper and say it. I would not let them testify in a court case against Scientology. That's going too damn far. You're causing more destruction than you're worth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can test a person.
Yeah. That's what I'm telling you.
Fuck. They go to a lot of lengths to get back at people that were against the cult and that. But then that ended up making them famous for it, because it was so well known, and everything else within it is kind of a secret. The only thing we knew about it was the fucking, if you say something bad about Scientology, they're going to come after you. That's all people flipping knew from the outside.
What I'm doing right here, no way, Jose. You ain't making no tape like that. You know what I'm saying? The case officer is going to put us, no. You ain't doing that. Okay. So that's one way to tell.
Yeah.
When I first went on post in early 1974, there was a case called Goodrich. I think his name was Robert Goodrich, Robert and Lois Goodrich. This guy was claiming that he had gotten auditing and it gave him a headache, which wouldn't go away. So Ron had written an eval, and the guys who were on post before me in the San Francisco Intelligence Bureau were not handling it, and the guys at USGO weren't handling it, and Ron was getting kind of upset about all that. So he wrote that eval that said, "You guys are missing the boat. You don't understand the importance of this. This has got to get handled." I don't know that he wrote any steps out, of what to do. I never saw that. I just know that he wanted it handled. I went on post immediately, and that was one of the first things that we did handle. And that was a rather simple handling, as it turned out, because I got a spy in on them. They were there for maybe 2 months, something like that. The person basically became friends with the wife, Lois Goodrich, and talked her out of doing it. That's how that happened. Just said, yeah.
Do you know, it makes me wonder how many people tried to sue Scientology and were persuaded not to, in a very threatening way, sort of thing. When these activities are we're all so public in that, and they're all public now kind of thing, what would make somebody want to join a cult like Scientology when all this shit was necessary, all this shenanigans in the background? Makes me wonder, what are they trying to hide? What are they trying to cover up? Obviously a lot.
Just basically, said, you really ought to just drop that case with Scientology because, you're not going to win. It's not going to be worth it. It's going to be a lot of headaches and then and there. And because they had become friends, she's
a lot of headaches, along with the headache that he already had.
Said, you're probably right, and dropped the stupid thing. That's how that thing got handled. In the case of this spy that I had in the anti-cult movement, we were predicting attacks all over the country with that person. I think maybe I was the only one who had successfully infiltrated the anti-cult movement because of what my seniors at USGO were saying. They were always calling me, going, "Who's getting deprogrammed next?" And I said, "Well, isn't anybody else out there working besides me? Don't you have any other spies out there to tell you?" Because they wanted to know what was happening in New York and Florida and everywhere else, right? Asking me. And I was up in San Francisco. We predicted deprogrammings in other considered cults, Mooney deprogrammings, you name it, we predicted those as well and prevented a lot of them from happening. We considered them allies, and so if a Mooney was going to be deprogrammed, we would predict that, and we would let them know, and they would go hide the person or whatever they had to do, to stop that from happening. That happened because of our spies. Mostly, our primary interest, of course, was Scientologists. We predicted those and prevented those from happening. I did read one of the policies where it said that we weren't supposed to do anything illegal. I became aware in the course of my training that things were being done that were illegal.
Obviously.
I went to the Deputy Guardian for Intelligence U.S. By the way, we didn't call it the Information Bureau. We called it Intelligence, what it was. Calling it the Information Bureau was the only time we referred to it that way was when we were talking to somebody who wasn't in the GO. And that was kind of our cover, that we were information. We never told them we were intelligence. But amongst ourselves, we didn't call ourselves information. We were intelligence. So anyway, I read, don't do anything illegal. I went to the Deputy Guardian Intelligence U.S., who was Terry Milner. I said, some people aren't following this policy. They're doing things that are illegal. And he knew about it. That's what I found out. He says, "Yeah, I know about that." And I says, well, they're violating policy. You know, what's the story here? You know, do we break the law? And he says, well, we don't actually break the law. We just bend it a little bit, you know.
Which he's about to find out about, you know. Fuck it out.
And he says, you know, he drew a line on his desk. This guy was kind of a crazy guy anyway. And and he says, there's the law, you know, and he says, we cross over that line, and then we, for a little bit, and then we kind of scurry back and try to get back and stay within the law. And so I said, well, the conclusion I came to was that, one, he knew about it, two, he was condoning it, and I, out of fear, did not take it any higher than that. I just dropped it.
Obviously.
Because I figured if he knew about it, then Worldwide knew about it, and I figured Mary Sue knew about it, and I couldn't imagine her withholding anything from Ron. I figured he must know about it too, so if I make any waves up lines about it to try to get that activity stopped, you know, then I would be dog meat, you know, so I just dropped it.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, they'd done things out of fear. I mean, like, you do your job or you get punished, you know? And, you know, there was word about you know, kind of a Scientology prison. I mean, Mike Render talked about it. He showed aerial photographs of kind of these prefabricated buildings, you know? You stepped over the line, you got thrown in there, like. I mean, like, it makes me wonder, was this not grounds for the FBI to come in and fucking investigate things like that? I don't know. There's lots of things I don't know.
As far as intelligence bureau's handling of people, there's an issue. I don't think it has a title. Nobody signed it. It's not any kind of a formal issue. It was just typing on a piece of paper. My impression was that LRH had written it, because I can't imagine anybody else in the organization writing this and getting away with it. They would have been pounded into the dirt for having written it. And, you know, unless it was him. That's the way I looked at it, plus the way it was written. Just like Intel its role, it seemed to me that was his writing style. But he, you know, basically what this issue said was the way that the Intelligence Bureau handled things was that you perform something that I'll say, what I call them, is a black intelligence operation, and I'm not the only one who called them that. They're called black ops. One of the datums that we were taught that is anybody that attacks Scientology has crimes. You know, that doesn't just mean crimes against Scientology, it just means crimes in general in the normal society definition and idea of what a crime is.
This is about to go up a gear. You know, this is about to get really into the weeds here.
We were supposed to investigate the background of anybody who attacked and find out what their crimes were. And then prosecute them for it.
See, that's the thing. You give them information, even though you're interested in Scientology, they get everything on you. Further down the line, it can be used against you. So, moral of the story is, stay away from them. Don't give names, don't give numbers, don't give addresses, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
It's the basic idea. If we couldn't, and the first thing that would happen with anybody who attacked is there's two types of data collection. One is called overt data collection, which we called ODC. The other type of data collection to be done was covert data collection, which was called CDC. We did both on any given attacker. We always did ODCs on them, and we always did CODCs on them.
This was before Facebook. Now Facebook does all the work for them.
The overt data collection was just stuff that was publicly available through public records, telephone books, library information, court documents, traffic tickets, you name it. You know, we checked every possible source, voter registration records, you know, just everything you could think of, and gathered as much information about that person's background as we could obtain. Then we had a general picture of the person. We knew who his relatives were and who he was connected to, where he worked, all that kind of stuff. That came from overt data collection. Then you'd go into covert data collection, which was essentially, you know, probably getting a spy in on the person and trying to find out what kind of misdeeds the guy was up to, you know, what are this guy's crimes, you know, what is he doing? Is he cheating on his wife? Is he, you know, taking drugs? Is he doing anything else that broke any kind of a law whatsoever? You know, that.
Here's the thing. In recent times, Aaron Smith-Levin done a video, behind a paywall, mind you, on Nora and Nora's bankruptcy, to try and shut her up, because Nora had filed for bankruptcy sometime, I think it was last year or something like that, and Aaron found this out and he made it public to try and shame her. And she came on, she says, there's no shame in that. But that's Scientology tactics. That is another red flag on Aaron Smith-Levin. You know? And some of the activity revolving around Zero Dark Tony, who goes by Tony D on YouTube. Zero Dark Tony. They called out his real name, they found out his real name, they basically doxed him. They went trying looking for his house, they'd done that publicly. I know Tony flippin' Tony said a lot of really bad things, don't get me wrong. But that doesn't give them an excuse to go doxing people. That is one of the reasons why I'm very, very flippin' scared to have any trust in this movement, this SPTV movement, when Aaron Smith-Levin is now behind a paywall talking shit on Nora or anybody else that calls him out, because he wants to keep his public image squeaky clean. Although Jenna Miscavige had made public videos on Aaron Smith-Levin about his abuse of her and took them down and they're back together, she is now doing such videos behind a paywall. So they're now in cahoots together. That is concerning.
That's what we were looking for in our covert data collection. If we found crimes, we tried to get the person prosecuted and put in jail. That was the product that we wanted. That was the ideal scene. Get this guy behind bars, you know, for criticizing Scientology, basically. That's where you wanted them. You wanted them in jail. That was the ideal product to be obtained. Now, a lot of times we could not find this person committing crimes to put him in jail for. Maybe because he didn't have any, and maybe because we just couldn't find him. Either way.
Yeah, and we're going to fix that, aren't we?
And I believe in a lot of cases it was just because the guy didn't really have any. The datum wasn't true. But just because they attacked, they had crimes. I didn't find that to be a one-for-one situation anyway. So now what do you do that you can't find any actual crimes? Well, that's what this particular hatting thing was about, was you performed black operations on the person. The first type of black operation would be to Okay, if the guy doesn't have any actual crimes, well, let's make him guilty of some crimes then. Manufacture some crimes, right? Set them up, sting operation type stuff. I know of some that were actually done. I don't have to give examples. There was a guy in Sacramento named Jim Estabrook. I got one of my agents to go get some drugs, purchase some illegal drugs, marijuana or whatever it was, plant them in the guy's car, and then call the cops on him and try to get him arrested for possession of illegal drugs. Geez, you just let your imagination run wild because we were allowed to do that. It's like anything you could think of was basically okay. Fair game was a policy letter written by LRH, I guess, in mid-60s, I think.
And a lot of the ex-Scientology, talk about fair game, and some of them still practice it, even though they're out of Scientology. I don't understand it. Either you're in a cult or you're out of a cult. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And it was a fundamental geopolicy. Fair game meant that a Scientologist could do anything to an enemy of Scientology. Didn't matter what it was. You could actually physically harm the person. You could lie to them, sue them into poverty, destroy the person's reputation, or destroy him physically if you wanted to, with no repercussion on the Scientologist for having done it.
I heard another case of a dog getting killed. These things happened.
What fair game means. Yeah, I mean that's what we were doing. That was our daily job, was to apply that policy. That was our total job, if you ask me. You're attacking Scientology, you're fair game, whatever we do to you doesn't really matter, okay? As far as Scientology was concerned, you were in no trouble. I don't know the details on it, but it was causing a public relations flap when people were labeled fair game. So a issue came out that said, stop labeling people fair game, which was done. We stopped calling people fair game, but the action of treating them like fair game never stopped. Okay, that policy was still in effect. I mean, my God, it was the very heart and soul of what we were doing. Okay, we would have been out of a job if we stopped doing fair game. Another type of black operation was to get the guy fired from his job. The theory on that was that people use their jobs, their position that they had to have at work, as a kind of a position to attack Scientology from. In a lot of cases that was true. Maybe the guy was a government official. He was using his job as a government official to attack Scientology.
That's flipping crazy. Where actually they had the balls to go after politicians. Flipping mad. Now, obviously, a lot of things have changed since then. And this video was probably not even digital at the time. It was probably done on a VHS tape. We didn't have internet. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have, masses of people, the internet was part of their everyday life and stuff like that. Nowadays it's an awful lot difficult because a lot of people can say a lot of things and you can't come after everybody. Because, way back in the day, there was TV stations. Now we got TV stations in our own homes in a way. Whoever thought that back in the 70s and 80s, where I would be in my sitting room talking to the internet, and people could sit down and watch me on their TVs. You can do it too. It's flipping mad. But the technology, the boost in technology, made it more and more difficult to go down these kinds of routes. Then again, you know, Scientology boasted they have millions of members. Aaron Smith Levin reckons there's about only 25,000 worldwide. They're outnumbered, if that's true. Do you know? And they're outsmarted by people being able to be sitting in their houses and talk about whatever they want, you know?
So the idea was, let's cost him his job, get him the heck out of there, and then he won't have that position to attack Scientology from anymore. Short of that, it didn't have to be that he was using his job to attack Scientology from, but in all cases, it was at least his support, right? And if you cost him his job, he doesn't have money, and he's got a major problem to go deal with in his life of not having any work and income to support himself. So costing the guy his job was always a good thing to do. That was also a standard thing to do, was we would always try to cost the guy his job. We would always try to get him in jail, and we would always try to cost him his job. Lots of people's businesses have been destroyed because of this.
How do you do it?
Huh?
How do you destroy your business?
Oh gosh, you know, there's lots of ways. You know, this is not a real example, but let's say that a guy has his own work, right? He has his own company. He, of course, has clients, right, that buy from him and that kind of a thing. Let's say that the guy is he's an artist and he paints pictures, and he's got certain art studios that normally buy his pictures and sell them for him. They would go to those art studios and just badmouth the guy in any kind of a way, make the people who buy from him normally decide that they don't, for whatever reason they have, they don't like him, they're not going to buy from him anymore, and he ends up with no business.
Here's another thing. Guy owns a restaurant. Back in the 70s and 80s, there's no flipping security cameras like there is now. You go into the restaurant and you sneak into the kitchen or go into one of the bathrooms and let loose a load of mice or cockroaches and stuff. Then ring the health department, or simply just go past the premises and put all that shit in through the letterbox. Who's going to fucking know?
You know, he goes broke. That would be an example. Basically, to cost the guy the job, now I'm getting back to this issue I'm talking about that teaches you how to do this. This is what it said, right? You survey for the love and the hate buttons of the boss. So this guy has a boss. He's employed by this person, this company. What does the boss love and what does the boss hate? You were supposed to find that out with your spy. Or you could have found it out with a pretext interview, you know, a suitable guise. Then you create situations, which are always imaginary situations, where the boss, you try to line this employee up with whatever the boss hates. Okay, so if the guy, you find out the boss hates homosexuals, now you want to get the boss to think that this guy who's a Captain Scientology is a homosexual, you know. And because he is a homosexual, now the boss not liking that type of person, he's going to look for some way to get rid of this guy. He'll probably find some, you know, you can't say that's the reason he's getting rid of him, but that's the reason he's getting rid of him, you know. He'll find something fault with this guy's work and get rid of him. I'll give you an example of using the love-hate button. Okay, this is an actual operation that I did. There was a guy in the health department in Sacramento by the name of Jim Esterbrook. He was attacking Narconon. The reason he was attacking Narconon...
I have no idea why the camera has zoomed in that far. It's not me. by the looks of it. I don't think it is, anyway.
which we didn't know at the time, was that he had plans for starting his own drug rehabilitation group in Sacramento, California.
Oh, this is a good one.
He was an official in the health department in Sacramento, state health department, okay? And he was using that position to attack Narconon from. He wrote a very criticizing report, you know, about that thick on the subject of Narconon. We found out that through the spy that Jim Esterbrook had plans on starting a new drug program, which he was applying to the state for. He was asking for the state funding for his new drug program, which he was going to hold up in the mountains. One day, me and my right-hand man took a drive up to the mountain community where this was going to happen. Okay, we picked up a couple of teenage girls that were hitchhiking on the road. We went swimming in a river with them that day.
Never mind. Continue. Fucking hell. No, I'm better off not saying it.
Just got in communication with these two teenage girls, and while we're driving them up to, after we went swimming, we're driving them up to where they live. And I said, by the way, what if people don't like up here, right? I'm working the hate button, see? And they say, well, we hate hippies, right? So I go, okay, you guys hate hippies. In fact, she tells me the story. She says, I'll show you how bad we hate hippies. There's a guy up here that owns 2 houses. He lives in one, the other one's vacant. Some hippies moved into it. He came over with gas cans, poured it on his own house, and burned his own house down. That's how much we hate hippies. So I go back down to Sacramento. I recruit about 6 to 8 Scientologists. These are all guys. And I say, you don't take a bath for a week, you don't shave for a week, and at the end of that week, they did that, right?
Fuck. No. No. Yuck. No.
We dress them up like hippies. We go up there. I've got a radio. They have a radio. I have them wait outside of town. They're in some hippie-looking dumbass van, right? You can get the picture already, don't you? So he leaves finally. He goes down into Sacramento, wherever he's going. He's going to be gone for an hour or something. And I radio back to the hippies in the van, okay, come into town. He's gone. They come into town. They pretend like they're friends of this guy, right? The PR guy, like they know him. Hey, where's Mike so-and-so? We're his good buds, right?
Oh, no.
And my God, we ARC broke everybody in that town badly, okay? It's like,
Fuck.
the stuff they did everything they could possibly do that was untactful, to insult people, to, you know, they would like go into some shop or some little old lady's in there with her values, and they would go, you got any stuff we can roll our weed with? You know, kick the dog, grab the girls' asses, you know, everything you could think of, right?
Jeez. Crikey.
Insulting people, and all under the making them think that they were friends with this guy. They knew about the drug program. They were going to be part of this new drug program. And isn't it going to be wonderful when we have this drug program up here, because all of these people like us are going to come, and we're going to be smoking dope and getting your kids to smoke dope, and it's going to be a great time, right?
Fucking hell.
Well, that went on for about 10, 15 minutes, and that town was terrorized when they left, you know. And in a small town like that, I mean, anything that happens, you know, if a dog barks or something, it hits the paper. I mean, this was a major catastrophe.
Yeah, it would be.
For these people.
Yeah.
So they said, there ain't no way in hell we're having a drug program up here.
Back then, people were neighbors. People lived in the same house for a long, long time. Nowadays, there's a lot of rented houses, so, you know, community, the sense of community is kind of falling apart. So those kind of tactics wouldn't necessarily be as effective as it was back then, when there was a more tight community, especially in them small villages and stuff.
And all this guy did was go down to Sacramento for an hour.
Yeah. Well, he
Came
got back.
and he was gone.
He came back in an hour, and this town is up in arms, man. They're ready to lynch this sucker, right?
Fucking hell.
So anyway, we let it go for a week. I recruited another agent who was a girl. I sent her up there to go sit in the bar, and they're still talking about this. All those damn hippies, you know. Oh, no, they're not coming up here, right? A week later. So she says to them, which, you know, I told her to say to them, why don't you guys circulate a petition up here and send it to your congressman, okay, and tell them you don't want no drug program up here, which they did, right there on the spot. That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck.
Here it is. Let's make the petition right now. They did it. They all signed it. They sent it to their congressman. Congressman got wind of it. And in fact, they phone called, and and they just raised a big stink, and it killed the whole drug program. They called up Estabrook and said, "You ain't getting no money for no drug programs."
Gee.
That wasn't the only operation we did on him. By the time I was done with him, the guy sold his house and got the hell out of the state to get away from me.
Did he know it was you?
Yeah, oh yeah. He didn't know it was me. He knew Scientology did this to him, but nobody listened to him.
Right.
He said, those damn Scientologists, and they thought he was nuts. See what I mean? I was out of San Francisco, but Sacramento was part of my area. All of Northern California, in fact, probably larger than that, was my area. All the way to the next org. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if anything happened in Sacramento, I packed my bag and I went down there and handled it. I don't know the people there.
Right.
I go in the org, I look around at the people that are on lines there. I know what I'm there to do. I'm there to recruit a spy. And I just look at people and evaluate them in my own opinion. Does this person look like they are enough of a Scientologist that I could ask them to do something like that and they would do it?
The thing is, if they said no, then they'd be in trouble, I think. So, whatever person this guy picks, they basically gotta do it, in my opinion.
That's all.
Did you find that it was difficult to find Scientologists that would do that?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Sorry to say.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of people I didn't talk to.
Right.
Because I knew ahead of time. The same guy ain't got what it takes. So I guess I was good at picking them. Mm-hmm. Because I can't think of any case where I asked the person to do it, they said no. Mm-hmm. We would try to go and find out things overtly when it came to giving information to PR and legal. We would try to get the information overtly, like legally, so that they could use it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? A lot of cases, we would obtain information covertly. Let's say that, okay, here's a specific example. In fact, it involves Vaughn.
Phone ringing in the background.
Okay. The San Francisco Better Business Bureau was in the same building as the org. They were one floor below us. And,
that wasn't correct.
well, yeah, they had a nasty little file on Scientology. Anybody called them about Scientology, they go, yeah, give them some critical stuff, right? So they were an enemy. So we, our task was to get their file so that PR could go in there and, try to dead agent the thing, that kind of stuff, Well, I got a Scientologist to be the janitor for the building. That gave us the key to the Better Business Bureau. Okay?
Here's where the Mission Impossible stuff starts coming in. This stuff is mad.
He handed the key over to me. We went in there at night, me and a couple other guys. We copied all their files, and then we walked out, and we had them. That's how we got them. Then PR, which was Vaughn at the time, Vaughn Young, PR in San Francisco, we turned the files over to him. So we had to have some story about how did we get this. Well, how did we got that is that we wrote a letter. We didn't write it, we typed it. We went on there. We went on the BBB's own typewriters, right? Because you can track typewriters.
Like fingerprints sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like every letter, the older typewriters had the little stamp, you know, and they're not all the same. There's slight differences, and some of them may have a little tiniest little chip on them and that, and they can be letters have been traced down to typewriters just because of a tiny little chip missing in one of the letters, and it comes out on the paper.
Right, so we didn't type it on our typewriter, we typed it on their typewriter. Why not? We're in their damn building. So we typed a little letter from, you know, the letter said that, you know, they had some axe to grind with their boss at the BB, that like that's coming from a person who works at the BBB, right? Is typing this letter, and by the way, I don't think this is right, and here's their file, and mailed it. Well, that isn't how we got it, but that's what the letter said how we got it, and therefore that made that data overt. See what I mean? It looked like it was overtly obtained. Well, it wasn't. Well, that's common practice. I mean, that's just standard everyday stuff, okay? We had to take information that we had obtained covertly and illegally and make it, you know, make it overt. How can we use it overtly? How can we use it legally? How can we use it in PR? Yeah. That was, you know, just part of a day's work. Okay, so that's how we nailed them. Okay, so then Vaughn goes and gets the press, right? The media I'm talking about. The newspaper guys, right? The TV guys, cameras, everything, stomps into the BBB, throws the file down. What the hell is this? You know what I mean? And then proceeds to tear them up in front of the press. There's nobody who's safe from this. There was nobody excluded from this. I don't care if you're a judge, you're the president, you work for the CIA. It doesn't matter. You're just a private citizen, you're a cop. I don't care if you're a cop. I'm going to tear you apart. You know what I mean?
Gee.
This tech.
No boundaries.
No.
No boundaries.
So that's what they call tech, because my definition of tech is technology. I think their definition of tech might be a little bit different. Can't understand why at the beginning he says he still likes the tech. He still likes doing this? I don't know.
My frame of mind at the time I was doing this was that, which is no question in my mind, the frame of mind of the people who do it today, is that Scientology was the savior of the world, or if that's the right words. We were going to clear the planet.
The planet.
We were going to eliminate criminality, insanity, and war on this planet. Those are the aims of Scientology, right? And we felt like we had the technology to do that with, and that anybody that would destroy that technology was
the enemy.
You know,
Fair game.
well, we weren't going to let them do it. The next button that is used is called the protect button. And the way you design black operations off of the protect button is you find out what the enemy or critic is, what he's trying to protect, basically. So let's say he's trying to protect his marriage. You know, you would design a black operation to cost him his marriage. Let's say you would have a prostitute call up his wife and go, and say that I slept with your husband. So the idea there would be that now that his marriage has been threatened, he backs off and stops attacking Scientology in order to prevent his marriage from being destroyed.
You can't. I don't know if I should say this, but you can't use that on Aaron Smith 11. Just saying.
I'll give you a real one that I did using the protect button. Ida Camburn was one. I got a spy in on Ida Camburn. She had been living in the LA area. Her son was in Scientology. She didn't like it. She was part of the anti-cult movement. She moved up into the Bay Area, which was my area. I got a message from USGO saying that she had done this and, that she was an enemy. So I was supposed to handle her, so I got a spy in on Ida Camburn. The girl found out, it took, 2 or 3 months to find out what we wanted to know, but we found out that Ida Camburn was trying to protect her marriage. She had no job, she had no career. She was totally dependent upon her husband for a living. And, if anything happened to that marriage, she was cooked. Had no way to support herself. So that's what she was trying to protect. Her husband's protect button was his job. He had told Ida that, I don't care if you're part of the anti-cult movement, but I never want to have anything happen to me at work because you're involved in this.
And guess what happens? This is messed up.
If I ever get embarrassed at work, we are going to get a divorce, right? You either get out of that or we get a divorce. Now, knowing both of those things, I sent some picketers down to where her husband worked one day. And
at least he comes out and says it. When I hear people like Mike Render talk about some of these kinds of incidents, Mike was always talking in the third person, like he just kept himself out of it because he was trying to keep an image. Do you know what I mean? This squeaky clean image. Obviously he wasn't clean, but this guy just goes on out. We done it. Fuck it. You know what I mean?
they made a big scene out in front of his work, religious discrimination signs, that kind of a thing, just protested, embarrassed him at work. He came home that night, said, Ida, you either get out of the anti-cult thing or we get a divorce. Of course, Ida couldn't afford a divorce, so she quit the anti-cult movement that day. She was done. Things I did on Snow White program. That was to get all government files on the subject of Scientology so that PR could go in and do false report corrections on those files. The methods used to obtain files, I know of one of my juniors had a suitable guise that he had made where he was able to obtain some government files legally, because a suitable guise is legal. It's their problem if they give it to you, right? He got some Justice Department files with a suitable guise that he was doing a anti-Scientology movie, and some people did turn over their files to him. However, not everybody fell for that particular suitable guise, and a lot of government agencies says, "Well, get out of here with your movie. We're not interested." We're not. So they didn't give them their files. One of the people who wouldn't turn over their files was the Yolo County District Attorney's Office, the Justice Department, and the Attorney General's Office in Sacramento.
Fuck.
CI&I files, this is criminal intelligence investigation, people like that, they just wouldn't turn over their files. So we had to all resort to some other methods to obtain those files. In the case of the Yolo County DA, his name was Roger Brown at the time. The way we got into his files was at night. Well, actually, I took my right-hand man with me, had him go inside the office while they were still open, go into the ladies' bathroom, and hide in there. So everybody left that day at 5 as usual. locked up their doors and windows and so forth. But my guy was in the bathroom. So after we knew they were all gone, he opened the back window to the ladies' bathroom. I crawled through. We had lock picks. We got into their locked file cabinets, got out the Scientology files, and copied them all on their copier, and crawled out the window and left. That was how we got those files.
Couldn't do that today. Absolutely no way they could do that today. You know, with all the security cameras and stuff like that.
In the case of the Attorney General's office for the state of California, that was, we just went in there after hours. We got in. I think that was another case of that we just hid in the building until everybody left. The janitors came in. That made it a kind of an exciting moment. We were trying to hide from the janitors.
Gee.
But that was another case of lock picks. This is how we got them. You know, got into their file cabinets and copied their files. I did another one where they sent me to get the files of the World Federation for Mental Health. The headquarters for the World Federation of Mental Health was in the Caribbean at the time. I think it was Grenada or one of those countries down there. I was sent down there under the instructions that I was to obtain those files and do not come back without them. You know, and I thought that that meant that I would be expelled if I did come back without them.
Most likely. Most likely. Or heavily punished. Scrubbing floors for years. I don't know.
Said use whatever means you have to. We don't care if you have to break and enter. We don't care if you have to use a sledgehammer. Whatever you got to do, bring those files back here. Well, we always tried suitable guises first, you know, and we only resorted to breaking and entering if those didn't work. I had another missionaire with me who had a suitable guise of being a Time magazine reporter. We had built a complete identity for him that he was, in fact, a Time magazine reporter. So we go down there. I was the backup, and I was to do the B&E or whatever it took to get him if he failed to get him.
B&E.
Breaking and entering. Illegal method of entering a building. So we went down to the Caribbean. He used his suitable guise on whoever was there. I was not with him. I was waiting outside. The place was incredibly fortified. Guards walking around, armed guards with police dogs and that kind of a thing. And I'm going, yeah, and I got to come back with these or else, right?
Gee.
So what'd you do?
Fucking hell.
As it turned out, he goes in with his suitable guise. He finds out that they are just in the process of moving the headquarters from there to Canada and that the files weren't there. And so he told me that, and I went, oh, wow, I'm glad they're not here.
Fucking hell.
I just see me in some foreign country, right, in jail. Or some dog gnawing my ankle off, you know, trying to get those files.
I wonder how much he was getting paid for all this shit. You know? Especially when you hear about, you know, just ordinary Scientologists getting as little as 45, you know, dollars a week. You know? I don't know.
So we reported that back and said they've moved the headquarters to Canada. The files are up there. They said, okay, you're on your way to Canada, which
Yeah.
we did. We went to Canada. It was Christmas time, and nobody was there. There was nobody to do a suitable guise on. Everybody was on Christmas vacation. It was a hospital, a mental hospital. So we tried to talk the receptionist of the building into letting us into the office where the World Federation for Mental Health headquarters was. and we actually succeeded at that. The plan that we devised was that we were going to leave a Christmas present for the president of the Federation. Since he wasn't available for us to hand deliver it, we said, can you let us in his office? We'll put the present on his table, and then we'll leave. Okay, well, she agreed to that. My partner went in, he put the present on the table. While she was going in and letting him do that, I got a piece of tape behind me, right, and I taped the door. So that when you shut the door, the latch doesn't close, right? Watergate, right. So that's how we got in that office. As it turned out, in that case, the files were en route between the two. They actually weren't there, so we took some other stuff, you know, about how they were electric shocking people, or, oh, it was something about a report on Russia and electric shock and blah, blah, blah. We got whatever they had. We got back and said, told them, you know, that as it turned out, the files were in transit. They weren't at either location at this point in time. We didn't get in any trouble for it. You know, it was like, I guess they fired another mission later to do it. The way we got the files out of the health department files on Scientology was we went in the building after hours. We had to work around the cleaning people every day in that particular situation. We posed as employees of the health department in that situation, and we'd sit at desks and pretend like we were working while they did their cleaning.
Fuck's sake.
At the time, their security was pretty poor. We didn't have to use the
Obviously.
We went in when the building was open, right? They would, I had an agent in there. Not that I recruited her and sent her in. She was already working there. She was a Scientologist who had a job there already, and I found out about that. So it wasn't a matter of how did we get in, it was how did we get out. See, in that case. So we would get in while they were still open. They would lock the doors. We were locked inside. But when we were done with our nightly dirty work, right, I would call her on the phone, come down here and lock the door for us. And that's how we got out. Okay? So one night I went to, me and my partner were upstairs copying files. I went to go down out of the building for some reason. And there was a trap. They had done something. I guess we'd taken a break for a month or so or something, went back to get some more. And they had done something. They built a double door system, right, to exit the building. It's one of these glass cage things, you know, where I walked through the first door and that closed behind me and locked, right? And I couldn't get out the next door, which was also locked, so I'm locked inside this cubicle.
Right.
Okay.
Oh.
And the camera's on me, and the guy's talking to me. I said, "What are you doing in the building?" Right? Yeah.
Think on your feet.
I had to totally think on my feet because I wasn't planning for this event, right? And so I said, "Well, my girlfriend works here, and I was sitting in the lobby over there, waiting for her to get off work. I thought she was working overtime. I just came to the conclusion, I guess she must have left and I didn't see her. And so now I'm just trying to get out of the damn building, right?" And he bought it, and he buzzed me out. He says, "Okay, buzz me out," right? So I got out, but my partner's trapped up there. But fortunately, we had this girl that was a Scientologist that worked there. I called her up and I said, "My partner's stuck up there. Come get him out of there," which she did. She had the proper ID. She walked in. The guy that was the guard, "Here's my ID," lets her in the building. She escorts the guy out, and that's how we got out that night. You could have told people who were in Scientology or people in the world that what the GO was doing. Let's say the GO had a defector, and so one of us guys like me walked out and said, "This is what we're doing." Nobody would have believed it. Okay? Same holds true for today. You try to go tell people who are other Scientologists or people in the normal society, this is what RTC is doing today, and they won't believe it.
I think this FBI raid, I think, was 1977, and I think Mary Sue Hubbard, who actually went to jail. I think it was through this FBI investigation. You know, fuck.
Okay, so, but the Geo raid happened, right? And the person who would have been saying that back at the time would have been totally vindicated that he was telling the truth by the fact of that FBI raid, walking out of there with box loads of evidence that this was the daily work of these people. Okay, the person who decided to, you know, be brave enough to come out and tell everybody what was going on in there, all of a sudden becomes believable because of the box loads of evidence that the FBI walked out with. At that point, it was undeniable. There was no way for those people to get out of it. They had all the evidence they needed for a conviction. The same situation exists today. They've got a few individuals that are coming out of RTC, OSA area saying this is what's going on. I highly recommend you believe what they're telling you, even if they don't have documented proof in their hand. Maybe we ought to have another raid and you'll have plenty of documented proof. When that raid happened, I was working in San Francisco. We got news that the FBI was raiding down there. Prior to that raid happening, we just wrote reports because we were autonomous. Nobody could come into the Guardian's office and look at what we were doing, and we just wrote it the way it was. You know, it was like, hi, this is Mike. Today I did 16 black ops, spied on this, lockpicked that. You know, we just said it however it was. There was no effort to encode anything or anything. It's just, you know, reported it straight the way it happened. So what the FBI got was, you know, just the most damaging evidence you could imagine. We knew the cat was out of the bag and there was really no hope. The phone call I got was that they were raiding the files down there, and I knew what that meant was that, you know, and there was a potential for a raid on every Guardian's office around the world at the time, and so I was told to get the heck out of there. What we did was went out and rented a U-Haul type truck, Ryder type truck, a huge one. We took all of our intelligence files out, put them in the back of that truck, and left. You know, drove a couple states away or something like that. We operated out of the back of that thing for a while. After the raid, we got instructions to go through all of our files one by one, every page, and just take a razor blade and hack out of there anything that was incriminating.
Now, what particularly were you told to hack out?
Down in LA, I think they were told to get rid of any documents that showed that Ron was running Scientology in any fashion. We didn't have that problem in San Francisco, so that wasn't one of our orders. Ron didn't issue any orders to us directly. You know what I mean? We got all of our orders from USGO. Even if they came from him, they still came to us via USGO.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't say they were his order. So, you know, we just spent a while, you know, just cutting out, you know, all this criminal stuff. And in some cases, it was the whole damn file. The whole damn file's criminal. Just throw that file out of here. You know, they did their grand jury things. You know, they indicted the people they wanted to indict. I didn't happen to be one of them. I could have been one of them, but you know, the majority of us, for whatever reason, I still don't know to this day, they let us off the hook. Anyway, I didn't complain about that. I was happy. And on the day the statute of limitations ran out, you know, I had a little party.
Fuck.
This wasn't one that I did, but my juniors participated in. I just happened to be in town at the time. A psychiatrist from Mexico was coming up. I don't know the guy's name. Seems like it started with an M or something like that. But he was coming up to San Francisco, and he was going to give a speech to other psychiatrists at the Hilton Hotel there, which is just right around the corner from the org. They had some kind of a convention. He was their main speaker, and the operation was, and a guy flew up from USGO who was going to do it. His name is Gary Lawrence. he wasn't very good at black ops. I mean, he wasn't as creative as my mind, you know. These were the kinds of things he thought of. Mine were a little more incisive and, you know what I mean, and effective as well, like Ida Cam Burns and that kind of thing, you know. But his, he couldn't think of ops like that to do to people, so he thought of things like LSD in their toothpaste. You know, so
Too flamboyant.
yeah. So, and maybe that's the problem today. Maybe the guys down there aren't that bright, so they end up with things like the Minutemen and stuff like that. You know, this is what we'll do. We'll have a hit-and-run accident. Yeah, that's a good idea. You know, they went out got some LSD. The solution to this guy giving a speech was they're going to put LSD in his toothpaste. So therefore, when he got up to give a speech, you know, he would go on a drug trip, and everybody would think he was crazy. That was their plan. They got into his room, and I got back from my mission, and I heard about this, and I went, you guys are crazy, you know, because it wasn't that part. My junior was totally freaked out, you know. He was just having a moral cow over this thing, right? And the reason was, it wasn't so much the guy and putting LSD in the guy's toothpaste. It was the fact that the guy's wife was with him and she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And they put it in her toothpaste too.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah.
so what happened? What happened?
I didn't even want to hear. I said, I don't even want to hear what happened. You guys are crazy, you know? My
Gee.
junior was in a state to be tied, you know?
Because he had done it?
He participated in it, well, to some degree. I don't think he actually, I don't know because I wasn't there. You know, his name was Paul Elkins. After the raid in '77, I started really getting
Yes.
physically. Because I was hating what I was doing. And I wanted to get out of it in the worst way, but I didn't know how. You know? In 1979, 2 years after the raid happened, they asked me to be the security officer at the USGO. And I hated LA. I loved San Francisco. I never wanted to leave. They'd always been asking me to go work at USGO. I always said no because I don't want to live in LA. Well, I wanted to get out of doing black ops and breaking the law, you know, all the time like that. Sufficiently bad that I took the job.
Probably from years of doing that stuff, it's flipping stressful, like, you know. But, you know, this is giving you an insight to, you know, the lengths that these people would go to protect their cult, you know. And when you have to protect it that much, there's obviously something wrong.
You know, because I didn't have to do the spying, I didn't have to do the black ops anymore, I didn't have to break the law anymore. All I had to do was work inside an organization, right, and look for spies. And that's all I had to do. And I said, well, this is, you know, this is wonderful. And I gladly took the job, you know. You should know about this in case anybody, you know, because I've told some people, and in case it ever comes up in a court case or anything like that, you know, then you have it from me. I'd be really the only one who knows about this. Well, there's a couple of people, but basically, while I was being security officer at USGO, there was a fellow who had been sent in by the Air Force. He was a captain in the Air Force, and he was working for, what's Air Force intelligence called? Yeah, I forget the initials for it. He was on lines at ASHO. He had made an application for the Guardian's office, and he was also making an application to get on lines at AO and do his clearing course in upper levels. I'm being the security officer at USGO. This guy shows up. His name was Bruce. I don't remember his last name, but he was a captain in the Air Force. He applied to get into the GO, so of course I would be somebody that had to look at him. I took a look at him and I went, you know. I didn't know he was captain of the Air Force at the time, but just looking at this guy, I went, you know. I got a spy in on him. He made friends with this guy named Bruce. They were powwowing around at night together and stuff like that. My spy was, of course, you know, his cover was to pretend like he was somewhat disaffected, you know, and therefore could be trusted. Once that was accomplished, then I pretended like I was the person, although I wasn't, right? He wanted to get on AO lines. I found out from my spy that this guy was stealing materials from ASHO at night and mailing them back to an Air Force base in Georgia.
Oh.
He wanted to get on AO lines. He was applying to get on AO lines. And therefore, I told him, now he didn't know who I was, right? He didn't know where I worked or anything. I told him that I was the person who worked at AO who approved people to get on AO lines. So he thought I was the guy that he had to appeal to get approval. So I said, well, before we give anybody approval, you know, we ask them questions on a meter first. And
D-meter.
I had a sec checker who was also a geo person. Her name was Connie, maybe Rhodes or something like that. Yeah.
I heard of her.
Connie Rhodes? Yeah. She, you know, I liked her.
She was tough.
Yeah. She was also funny. But anyway, she did the meter stuff, right, on these guys. I would sit in the room beside of her, and I could also ask questions if I wanted to. Although this isn't gangbang sec check type stuff, you know, I didn't keep people up past all hours, you know, I didn't beat them up or anything.
Unlike
basically,
some.
our technique for catching people was investigation tech, not the meter. The meter was there to fool him, not that we were relying on it in any way. We didn't care what the meter did. I would go down and ask him questions every night for about a week, you know, things that I wanted to know. You know, did he work for any government agency, blah, 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 stuff like this, right? We led him to, he lied through his teeth, right, to us, and on every question I asked him. We led him to believe that we believed his answers, right? And Connie let him know that, you know, the meter was agreeing with what he was saying. So he felt safe every night that he left our questioning session, and he went back and he would talk to my spy, and he would brag on all the lies he told and got away with.
Oh, no.
Those dumb son of, you know what I told him tonight? Yeah, that ain't the truth. And that's how I got the whole story, see? So at the end of the, 4 or 5 days of doing this, we sit down to have a meeting with the guy, right? He's not on the meter anymore. We had led him to believe all the way along that he was passing this thing, and he came in just happy as a clam, like a celebration, right? Like we were just going to write him and say, you're on the OT levels, right? That's what he thought was going to happen. He sits down that night, and I say, well, Bruce, we got a problem here. And so I start to tell him what my spy's been telling me. And he kind of turns white, and I said, now what about you being in the Air Force? So then he starts to, in the hopes of getting us to approve him, he starts talking to me, right? And he starts telling me, and he knows about what's going on at SRI. There's no way for him to know what's going on at SRI, unless he was in intelligence, because nobody in Scientology told him. That's my point. The government had to tell him about it. So he lays it all out. And I say, well, who's your case officer, and where are they, and what is your mission, and stuff like that. And he's over there sweating it, and he's trying to get out of this. And, in the course of conversing, he tells me, he's trying to give me presents. He tells me about the SRI stuff. He goes, you guys are considered to be a national security risk. because of those experiments up there at SRI. You know, we don't want people running around here who can exteriorize. You could spy on us, you know. Also, those tests that you did with the magnetic fields, right? A guy could influence them with his thought. He said that we were interested in that because actually, you know what happened is I told him I wasn't going to let him on when he spilled all these beans because the jig was up, you know. And he goes, you know, what we thought we could do, and that's when he told me we got 100 guys back in Georgia waiting to do this stuff as soon as I sent it to him, right? What we thought we could do is if they fired their missiles at us, right, because the magnetic field is the guidance system on a missile, if we could have our own OTs, turn them around and send them back down the hole they came out of. See? That's what they were looking at. So that's where that whole story comes from, is from that guy. As everybody now knows, you know, the GO was involved in this kind of thing. And I'd like to point out something that applies to today, because the GO and all these things I'm talking about have not changed one bit, okay? Just because they dismantled the GO and changed the name, the hat, and the personnel, and what they're doing and are supposed to be doing hasn't changed a fraction, okay? It's the same thing. This is our daily work, you know. This isn't something that happened occasionally. This is what we went into work to do every day and did every day. It was either getting spies in, breaking the law really didn't matter, you know, and doing black ops on people.
That's flipping crazy, like. Do you know? I mean, like, when you think about it, and when you think about some of the behaviors of the ex-Scientology movement, do you know, I done a bit of digging, and I, you know, a lot of these people were saying that, you know, that these people that are speaking up against SPTV were OSA operatives. So that would give them fair game to come after them. You know, and you know, I'm not going to get into the Tony thing, but William Good went live outside where he thought Zero Dark Tony was, and shouting on the street. I mean, like, I just see the same kind of behaviour, you know. And this thing about Aaron, you know, trying to shame other people like Nora Ames behind a paywall, disclosing stuff that has nothing to do with Scientology, like filing for bankruptcy and trying to shame her and stuff like that. I just see the same sort of behaviour. So I don't trust a lot of these people. I don't trust Scientology, and I don't trust a lot of the ex-Scientologists. So where are we in this situation? Well, if you were OSA and you were saying, you know, this SPTV is a bit of a problem, what are we going to do about it? Absolutely nothing, actually, because, you know, Aaron is making a mincemeat of it anyway. He's self-destructing as it is, so we don't have to do anything. But I just see these, there's a lot of this kind of stuff that's going on lately, and it makes me wonder, who's the Scientologist and who isn't at the moment? Because I know the examples we saw today was the extreme in that, but there was little tastes of it in some of the behaviour with some of these ex-Scientologists. So just be careful, folks. Genie Mac, you know? If there's anything other interesting, I'll cover that next. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I possibly will cover some of Mike Render's expose on Aaron, because we only done 2 of Mike Render's little videos before he died. He done a series. He done 6 or 7 videos, and he done them in 20-minute intervals because he just didn't have the energy to do it all in one go, sort of thing. See if there's anything interesting in that, you know. But in the meantime, folks, be careful. Be vigilant. Just be very, very careful who you trust, because like many others, I went on the wrong path and I followed somebody that turned out to be shady. So, you know, just be careful. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for all the support in the last week. I don't know what happened to my channel. I got 81 plus subscribers very, very suddenly. So thank you very, very much. I'm really, really grateful. Anyway, I'm going to go and I'll talk to you soon.